Welcome to Behind the 90 with Nika. Before we get started, as you know, I always like to explain what the 90 means. 90% of what we go through in life is about our past, and only 10% is about the here and now, which makes it very important to understand the 90 because the 90 represents our story. Today's guest, guys, I have a very special treat. This is a story that is definitely going to pull at your heartstrings. And I am so honored that this couple agreed to share their stories. Cherie Blackwell is the author of An Unknown Angel's Gift, a couple's long transplant journey. When you think about it, we don't often talk about organ donations, how that works. I know I haven't. I think I've been kind of nervous about it or just ignorant about how that process works. Because when you think about it, when we pass, what do we do with our organs? We don't do anything. They're with us. And so this couple, like I said, a book was written in regards to their story. And like I said, I am so honored to have them here. And again, the title of the book is An Unknown Angel's Gift, a couple's long transplant journey. Welcome, Robert and Cherie.
Thank
you
you.
so much for being here today. Like I said, I have been anticipating this interview because it's an interview unlike any other interviews that I've given. But I felt it was necessary. Kelsey, like I said, she was she was the reason for this introduction. And so I appreciate it. When she told me about your story and that you wrote a book, I said, I got to talk to them because I don't know much about organ donation, transplants, but I think it's an important topic to discuss so that we can raise awareness, more awareness, and build community around the topic because it is such an important topic. So before we get started, I'm just going to just warm it up a little bit before we really get into it. But when I say reading the title of your book, Cherie, you said a couple's long transplant journey. You didn't say Robert. You said it was together. You guys went through this together. And when I saw that, and even saying it, it just tugs at my heart because it speaks to the love that you have for your husband. You guys were in this together. This was not just a Robert thing. This was a Cherie and a Roberts thing. So Robert, and again, I thank you because without you, there's no this. And I appreciate you sharing your story to help other people. But like I said, to see that, it was so intentional. Like this was a story that they shared together. So before we get into the book, I always like to understand how people met each other. How did you meet? How did you guys meet?
So I met Robert through my ex, and I was with him at the time, with my ex at the time, and Robert had come to our home to pick up a piece of furniture or deliver
a couch.
Pick up a piece of pick
For
up
a
a
friend.
couch.
Because I had a pickup truck.
I can honestly say that when I saw him, it was electrifying.
Wow.
And I knew there was something there. Like when you know someone is your knight in shining armor,
Wow.
People talk about that feeling you get when you meet someone. I knew he was the one.
Wow, Cherie.
He was mysterious. He was interesting. And
wow.
I already had known that my current relationship was over.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest is it just all fell into place. It was like God brought him into my life at just the right time.
Wow. That's a beautiful story. You say you knew.
I knew it.
And what a gift that is, because to experience that, not a lot of people experience that. And to have that gift, to find your person and to know that without a shadow of doubt that this is my person. And you said it was something electrifying about him. Can you describe that?
He had this aura about him. He was just mysterious and attractive.
Easy on the eyes, huh, Cherie?
This long hair and just inviting. Just I wanted to get to know him.
Wow. That's great.
And he just, as time went on, things just developed into this beautiful friendship. We had common interests. His family, as time went on, his family made me feel welcome, and everything just fell into place. I felt like he got me out of something bad.
Okay.
And it became a wonderful thing. We just became wonderful friends.
Wow.
He pursued me. He called me. He bought me cards. He just was like very interested, and I was interested.
Consistently just beautiful person.
Consistently interested, and it just blossomed into a wonderful friendship, a wonderful relationship that I'm very grateful for.
That's awesome. That's a great story. Robert, how does it feel to hear those wonderful things about you? You're sitting there smiling.
I'm kind of surprised.
Are you?
At the word she's using, like electrifying and mysterious. But when I saw her, I just had a feeling that she's the one. I think I was 40 years old and never married. Had girlfriends here and there, people I dated and went out, hung with. But I just waited for that right one to come along. And when I seen her, I just knew it. It's typically about the same way as she was the one for me. And that's why I pursued what I pursued. She was married at the time, but I just had that feeling that we were going to be together. When I found out that they weren't going to stay together, then I went all in.
Opportunity, right?
Opportunity knocked, and I went all in and just
there you go.
Did everything I could to win her heart over.
Robert, I like that. Can you say that again for the men who are?
I said, if you see something that you know is going to be yours, you got to go all in and put everything in to get it.
Robert, you could do a whole seminar on that.
I'd go over in the wintertime. When I'd go be on my way to work and it was snowing, I'd stop and scrape the windows of her car. So when she came out to go to work, her car was cleared off. I just did stuff.
Because
I wrote her little notes, wrote her letters.
You knew she was the one.
I knew she was the one.
There was nothing that kept you from pursuing her.
Nothing at all.
Because sometimes what keeps us from pursuing each other, we get in our head about things and we get nervous. You were 40 when you got married, so.
Correct. No, I was older than that when I got married.
But you met her when you were 40.
Correct.
I guess just before you just weren't ready to settle down, or just.
And I was 29.
28.
Oh, okay. Very good.
So I guess I was attracted to younger women.
She's beautiful. Well, you guys are a beautiful looking couple. You guys are a good looking couple.
Thank you.
We were definitely made for each other.
I love it. Okay. If you had to describe, I know you said electrifying. That brings me to my next question. If you had to describe Robert in one word, how would you describe him and why? But you said electrifying. But is there another word you would describe him?
Hero.
Wow. Explain that.
Well, this goes into, when he became sick and the disease progressed and he was told he had to wear oxygen. He had to accept that fact. He had to take an early retirement. It was early in our marriage. You don't expect to have early in a relationship, in a marriage, one of you to become ill, where you have to caregive for that person and watch them struggle and accept things. You see a lot of that with older couples or marriages where they've been together 30, 40 years, they've retired, they lived their life, they've raised their family, and one of them becomes sick. Yes. But to be young as we were, and for me to watch him struggle and be on oxygen, not complain about it ever, make the best of it, still have a positive attitude. To me, that's someone that is a hero, because they, in spite of what they're going through, they persevere and they do everything.
That's great.
To make it, regardless of how they feel.
Wow. But I'm sure you had a lot to do with that too.
Mm-hmm.
Giving him the motivation, the energy and the drive to not only live for himself, but for you too, I'm sure, Robert. How would you describe her in one word?
My everything.
You're everything. Wow.
She is. She's the perfect woman.
Oh, wow, Robert.
She does everything around the house, for me, um, for herself. She takes care of herself. She makes her own money. She just does everything. And when I got sick, she did even more. I did less. She did more.
So match made in heaven. It was meant to be. It was
Definitely was meant to be.
So God knew what you needed, Robert, and He knew what you needed as well.
Yes.
Right. So so that you've mentioned Robert's previous diagnosis, how long into the marriage? How long into the marriage were you in the marriage before he was diagnosed with lung disease?
It was about 8 years.
8 years.
Yeah. Do you remember the setting where you were? How did you learn about it?
Oh, yeah. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Well, before you even answer that, Cherie, how did you learn that? So, 8 years in, you were diagnosed with lung disease. How did it all come about?
Actually, 2 years before we met, I had one of my lungs collapse, my left lung.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at work, and I went to the hospital. I thought it was pleurisy, and they told me that my lung collapsed and I needed a lung reduction. And that was in 1996.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a half of my left lung removed that day, and recovered from that. Went back to work, and we met in '97, early '97, and later in '97, I wasn't breathing so good again, so I went to the doctor, and he said, your right lung needs to be reduced. So they took a third of my right lung out. So now I had what they called bullas. There were blisters on my lungs. And one of them had popped on the left when I had that, and the other one was ready to pop. So he removed it. So I knew I had a lung disease of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you have COPD, it's not too bad.
Okay.
And then in 2002, we married. We were together 6 years, we married. And then 6 years later, while I was working, I couldn't breathe one day on the job. I was outside in the wintertime, and I was finding myself having a hard time breathing more and more. And this time, I couldn't catch my breath. So I left work. We went to a pulmonologist, and he put one of those things on my finger to measure my oxygen. And normal person's oxygen is 98% when they're breathing and that good.
Mm-hmm.
When I took a walk around down his hallway, mine dropped to 70. Okay. He said, "Oh man, you need to be on oxygen 24/7." Okay. And I'll suggest to you a lung transplant. I know a person at Henry Ford that'll take care of you. Okay. So I knew I had a problem with my lungs before I met her, and mm-hmm. she was with me and during the second surgery, so she's seen me struggle, and mm-hmm. And she was there the day they took the chest tube out. And she says, the doctor said, "Are you okay to be here for this?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, I'm okay." Mm-hmm. And when he pulled it out, she about fainted because it was like 4 feet long inside my chest. She says, "Oh my God."
Yeah. And he had told me that day that the physician said, your husband's in good health, but he has very bad lungs. Mm-hmm. He shouldn't be smoking.
And I still smoked.
Yeah, so he continued to smoke. And
it's a hard thing to quit.
Oh yeah, habits. Right.
Before that, I dabbled in drugs, and I did drugs for a long time, mm-hmm. and I quit those, but I still smoke cigarettes.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a hard habit to kick once you start. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure. So that's how you developed lung disease, lung cancer?
It wasn't lung cancer. It was COPD and emphysema. Never had lung cancer.
Okay, no, never. Okay, it was COPD.
Yes.
Okay, great. Not great, but it wasn't. So was that? So it wasn't lung cancer. It was COPD.
That's chronic
obstructive pulmonary disease and chronic emphysema. But leading up to that, he had always had lung issues. Like he was talking about those air-filled blisters that fill the lungs in the 90s when he had the 2 reduction surgeries. Mm-hmm. So leading up to and continuing to smoke made his disease progress. Had he stopped smoking and having those 2 lung reduction surgeries, the lungs rejuvenated because they had cut part of them out. Mm. However, by continuing to smoke, it kept his lungs diseased, and he ended up with chronic COPD emphysema, which in turn when he was getting worse and passed out at work, or not passed out, but excuse me, lost your breath at work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we went to the pulmonologist, and he ran testing and did scans and tested his pulse ox and said, this is not good. After you had done some x-rays and testing, sent him to some other physicians, but that day he had said, I need you to be on oxygen. And that was the day that I spoke of earlier, where I'll never forget it, when he said, you're going to need to be on oxygen. And seeing the look on Robert's face, that's all about acceptance for a person when they're sick, or have any kind of disease, and a doctor telling you, this is what you have, this is what you need to do. Robert wanted to work another 10 years. And in his field, he couldn't wear an oxygen tank. So I knew that was going to be very difficult to accept. And
I was 31 years in the factory at work at Ford's, and I wanted 10 more years because I just got a great job, a cleaner mover in a different building, clean building, and I had to retire. They told me, you can't wear out, you have to retire.
So you were forced into retirement.
I was forced to retire at the age of 51.
Okay.
Or 50. 51.
51. Okay. So before that, were you guys very active, doing a lot of hobbies?
Yeah.
Like, what are some things that you guys...
We went rollerblading, we went hiking, we traveled, we took the muscle car out.
We had a couple of muscle cars, and we always went to car shows and
lots of walking and
traveling, Vegas.
We love to travel, just spending time with family and friends and
road trips.
Yeah.
Okay. So once you got the diagnosis, what was the prognosis? What did they say? Like, this is the prognosis if you do this. This is the treatment.
Well, we had went to Henry Ford to see the lung transplant team. And it started out as a long round of testing and questions. And that, in and of itself, that was a lot of appointments. And then there was a meeting with the family where they wanted to discuss treatment and prognosis. Obviously, medicine changes constantly. So I don't know per se that they gave like a prognosis, like you're going to live this long, but I do remember that the surgeon saying, we need to do this within 2 years.
Correct. Dr. Nemi came in and says, we need to get you a set of lungs within 2 years. Or you're not going to make it, because my lungs were in pretty bad shape.
Yeah. 13% capacity. So everyone that has a normal set of lungs has 100% capacity. Someone that's on oxygen, it's like breathing through a straw.
Oh, okay.
So his whole one side was not working, and the other side was just at 13%.
Okay.
So him being on oxygen is what made it so he could make it through each day. And they would have him do these walks in the hallway. And that was very scary, because any exertion or walks will drop your oxygen levels when you can't breathe. And you're supposed to be in the 90s. Well, his would drop to like the 60s and 70s.
Okay.
And his fingers and toes would be tingling.
Turn purple and tingling, and his hair would be scratching.
Wow.
Blood pressure would drop. It was a very scary time. So when you ask about prognosis, the surgeon said within 2 years.
Within 2 years. So, and this was in, 2009, 2008, 2009? 2008.
Yeah.
That he said that to you. In 2008, they said, this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
And so you got on the transplant list, right?
After they check every part of your body, they test everything, anything and everything.
Skin, eyes.
Probably the only thing they didn't look at is my toenails, but
really,
but they check everything, to get you on the list, and just to know everything's perfect. Like, my body was perfect except for my lungs.
Okay.
So I was in the greatest of health when my lungs sucked.
Okay. So 2008, you got on the donor list.
Yeah, on the transplant list.
Right. I'm sorry, the transplant list. Thank you. And they said 2 years.
The doctor suggested that it should be done within 2 years.
That you should have a donor.
Right.
In 2 years. How do they estimate that?
Well, there's
go ahead.
Lots of criteria. They look at the patient's lab work, how well they manage their day-to-day activities. Mm-hmm. But I think a big part of it is just looking at the patient and their lungs and their condition, their diagnosis. Mm-hmm. And they look at like a certain scoring system based on the diagnosis. Many patients with COPD and emphysema have a very low score that they use to calculate when they could possibly be transplanted or be a recipient.
UNOS, United Network of Organ Sharing, they have a scoring system for transplant. So they have anywhere from 1 to 100, 100 being the worst. My score, I think, was 32. So people that are in the hospital on oxygen and that, their scores maybe 85, 90.
Okay.
So they're going to get it first, the offer first.
Okay.
People that are in the middle, if something becomes available out there, the set of lungs comes available from a donor, the person that's an organ donor, they'll send offers to hospitals. And some hospitals will accept them, some won't.
Okay.
So it's like a roll on the dice. How lucky can you be?
Wow,
they also said that he was very tall and thin, so we might be waiting a lot longer
because he was tall and thin.
Because
he's
I
got
have
a
long
chest cavity and long lungs, and a lot of the donors were petite. A lot of the offers that came in were from petite donors. So, and they even had said at one point that it might come from out of state and not Michigan.
Every time I went for an X-ray for the doctor's sake, he wanted to, like the surgeon wanted to see my lungs, and every month I'd go back and they take X-rays. They take an X-ray and they say, well, you can go. I said, I'm not leaving. They said, why not? I said, because you're gonna need another picture. Well, she goes, how do you know that? I says, because every time I come in here, you got to take 2 pictures because my lungs are so long, you only get half of it. She goes, no way. So she looks, she goes, yep, need another picture.
Wow. So that is so interesting. I never thought about that you have to be somewhat of the stature of the person.
Size, correct.
That the person who's donating, there has to be some type of resemblance.
Not just your blood work or
your blood work,
all the bodily things, but the lungs or heart or liver, pancreas, when they look at the chest cavity. And
okay. So 2008, they said that. So they gave you that 2-year mark. You're probably pretty hopeful. Like, okay, good. So they have this system. It's going to be 2 years.
So they give me a beeper, a pager. And they says, when this pager goes off, call the number and you'll come in for a transplant.
So you were a beeper.
So I wore a pager for 2 years.
A pager for 2 years.
And for the first 2 years on April 1st, I would call that number on the pager and it would go off. And she'd get all excited. I was, April Fools.
Robert, you did not do that.
I find that laughter is the best medicine. Everything that we did in this journey from 2008 until today, we make it funny. We put humor in everything. But I did it 2 years in a row and she hated me for it.
Wow. Because,
and every phone call I got that said 313, I'm at the office or wherever I'm at, it's like.
Because once you get that call,
you have
how much time do you have?
They say you had they said like if we ever traveled, we had to be within 4 hours of the hospital.
Oh.
So you'd have at least 4 hours to get to the hospital.
So you would need to be traveling by car and they didn't want you in a plane or anything?
We couldn't plan any trips that were over 4 hours.
Over 4 hours. But you could fly.
I could have flown.
We could. But if you went anywhere, you had to make sure there was a transplant center nearby. Because if he had any issues.
This was after the transplant.
Oh, I'm jumping ahead.
Don't jump ahead, Cherie.
Okay. We took a couple vacations.
You still had to plan with oxygen.
My sister and brother-in-law came in town and we went 4 hours away up north on a vacation. But just wait for the call.
But it was stressful with the tanks. You
I had to take all oxygen tanks and machines with me and
make sure everything worked. And still make sure you had somebody close if you needed.
So there was a lot of prep to going places and doing things, but it's nice that you didn't stop your life.
No, I tried.
It's important not to.
My wife would not let me. She planned stuff all the time just to keep me active.
Yeah.
Family gatherings or little parties or casino trips or something. She always had me going. I couldn't just sit back and poor me. She kept me going. She load up the truck, we're going here, or load up the truck, we're doing this.
Were you ever resistant? Were you open to it? Were you like, okay,
I was always open to it. She's doing this for us, not for me.
For us, like you said, a couple's lungs.
She had a family gathering one time where she had all her family come in, and it was out in Highland, Michigan, and I was on oxygen. I had to take my oxygen maker and a 100-foot hose and a generator to plug it in so I could enjoy the family gathering with everybody.
It was a reunion I planned for
the family
my
reunion,
side of the family. Like we brought cousins in from all over, and it was
Arizona, Florida,
it
Washington.
was a long prep process, but it was beautiful. It was wonderful. And they were all grateful. But we made it work, and he did everything he could that day to help, and that's the kind of person he is, too. He's got a huge heart, and he always wants to help people.
Yeah.
And make things, work better, possibly, than what they already are.
Right.
She's giving.
Right. So I love that you didn't stop life. There had to be, so was there hope? And I'm sure there were some times where you were discouraged. Can you talk about those times where you were hopeful? Can you talk about those times where you were discouraged? Because 2008, yeah, you're on that list, you're waiting, right? And let's say 2019, 10 comes, that's what, 2-year mark. Still waiting. What was the process? What was your thinking, Robert?
I'm just waiting for that phone call. I basically just went on with my life, and kept the phone handy.
Yeah, you had your oxygen.
On oxygen. 24/7 on oxygen. I had an oxygen maker in the basement of the house, and I ran a 50-foot hose up through the duct, the air conditioning duct, and walked around the house that way. And when I still did chores around the house, I cut the grass still.
You did.
I cleaned the gutters, which my pulmonologist, my transplant team says, you don't have to go up on the roof and clean gutters. I said, nobody else is going to do it. I said, I'm not going to ask somebody to do my job. So I put an extra 50-foot hose on there and climb up on the roof, and I'd clean gutters. And they said, and they'd say, well, after 2 years, they'd say, well, we're sorry you're waiting so long. I said, well, it's no big thing, because medicine gets better, the operation will get better, technology gets better. As long as I can live my life, I'm not really worried about the transplant. When it comes, it comes. And they every year they'd say, I'm sorry you're waiting. I said, I don't care, I'm waiting. Wow. I think 6 months before we got the call, I was done. I gave up. I just threw my towel in.
So how long did it take? I mean, could they said it was a 2-year time frame?
Well, I went past the 2-year time frame.
You went past
8 years he was on oxygen.
I went to the 3-year, the 4-year, the 5-year, and this whole time I'm doing pulmonary rehab and working out 3 days a week, because you got to be strong for a transplant.
That's right.
You have to have your muscles, and you have to be able to get out of bed the second day. So you got to be really strong and in tip-top shape. So I'd go to pulmonary rehab 3 times a week religiously. I don't care, if I had to pay for it, insurance covered so much, and then you had to pay for the rest, but you had to go. Yeah. So I did it, and when I was doing this, I was mentoring other people that are on oxygen and that, and telling them, this is what I'm going through, this is what I'm looking at. And then I meet a guy that's 32 years old. He comes in and he says, they said, I want you to meet Jamie, because Jamie's going to get enlisted for a lung transplant. So and he was young. He has 2 young children. And I explained to him what it was, and we started hanging out. We had similar interests. He had a muscle car. I had a muscle car. So we hung out, and I mentored him into the process. So we kind of watched out for each other.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you were on the donor list for 8 years. What carried you guys through the tough times?
Each other. She carried me, I carried her. Yeah. Now, I know she had moments where she broke down and cried and just, prayed like crazy and that. But, I couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah. What did those tough days look like, Cherie, for you?
It's hard to think back. It just seems like it all went by so quickly in some aspects. But when I think of the tough days, I just relied on other people. I would exercise or do yoga or talk to my friends or family or arrange events like he talked about, right, just to keep that positive energy and that interaction with people. I think really helped, having the laughter. And I think the more we saw family and friends and they saw him on oxygen and saw us together, they would become more inquisitive and understanding and really supportive. Just having that support system helped. My father was a huge support system. We lost him unexpectedly, but he was huge. He came to all of our support meetings. I know when Robert lost his father, he became very close to my father. And it meant a lot. So he was a huge, huge help. We would see him at the car shows and at his house, and it just really helped to talk to him. He had a lot of good words of advice.
Yeah.
My mother was very sick at a young age, and I think my father could relate to what we were going through. He really gave us a lot of good insight and positive energy. Yeah. And that is huge, to have support when you're going through anything.
Absolutely.
You need that support. So for me, the tough times was being able to talk to him and other friends and family. And being with friends and family.
Not shutting down and isolating
yourself.
yourself.
You cannot isolate. It's important to have somebody that you can talk to. It doesn't have to be a therapist or a doctor, but it can be, because it give you great insight. But just having a support system, I think, is huge in all of this. And we learned that at our monthly transplant meetings that we still go to this day and help coordinate with the doctors and the team. Wow. We learned something new every time. We started going when he was on oxygen, and we still continue to go every month and mentor people. And on social media, many different groups, we just give that input and advice, and it helps people to know that they're not the only one going through something. Yeah. And even if you talk to someone that isn't going through anything, but just to have that ear, for me, it's always been just to have a friend or family member that I can sit and talk to or laugh with or shop with, or,
just a little
and many times, when you're the caregiver going through something, people don't ask you how you're doing. I remember my doctors would be like, "Aren't you angry? Aren't you bothered by this?" And I was like, "No, I want this to be successful, and I would like to think that if we were in opposite shoes, that he would be the same way, that he would want to instill positive energy in me and want to be uplifting and helpful, and just to get you through until you get that transplant and you feel better and we can live the life that we want to live and feel better." I just wanted him to feel better.
Thank you. So family is key.
Yes.
Continuing on with life is key, because it's not a death sentence. It's not. You can live. So Robert, it's 8 years. Did you ever feel discouraged? Like, is this ever going to happen? Did you ever feel like you wanted to give up?
And just before the call in 2008, I was done.
You were done.
I told Cherie, I said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm not going to go back."
No, 2015.
2015, I'm sorry.
Right before the call.
Right before the call. I said, I don't want to go to rehab no more. I'm tired of waiting. And I turned it over to my faith.
You turned it to your faith.
And I just prayed on it.
Wow. How did it make you feel to hear him say that, Cherie? That he feels like, you know what, I'm done.
It was difficult, but I remember saying, turn to your faith. He was raised in a very faithful, caring family that relied on God, and I've always turned to my faith as well. And I also reiterated that. I said, you need to turn to your faith, turn to God, turn it over to God. And he did. I didn't know that he did. And the day he got his surgery, he told me that he had given it to God. And I said, it was just so emotional.
Yeah. Tell me about the time when you got the call. I want to hear both your, feelings, Robert.
Well, we were sitting there. It was right after dinner, and I just bought a bottle of that cinnamon liquor.
Cinnamon liquor? That sounds good. I've never heard of cinnamon.
Fireball? No, the cinnamon one. Anyway, I just bought this and I was going to try it. So I was getting ready to pour a shot of it, and her phone started going off there. She had a flower for our transplant coordinator.
So you didn't have the beeper on anymore?
No, they actually quit using the beeper 2 years into it. They just went to the phone call.
Oh, phone call.
And it was driving me crazy because every 3 months I'd have to change the batteries. It was costing me money.
Right.
So this flower came up on her phone, and I said, Cherie, Fidesz is calling you.
What did you call it? What was
her name was Fidesz, a nurse.
Okay, the nurse.
So I said, Fidesz is calling you. She goes, I don't know what she wants. And she answered it, and she picked it up, and she said, hello. And she says, is Robert there? She said, yeah. She goes, well, we have a set of lungs for him. And right there, I didn't take the drink, and I was like, oh my God. And she says, how soon can you be down here? I said, I can be there in 10 minutes.
You were at home. You weren't traveling.
And
that's good.
She says, well, we want you to come down tonight because we have a set of lungs for you.
And this was in 2015.
2015, December the 8th of 2015.
9 o'clock at night.
Watching a hockey game, getting ready to do a shot, and the phone rings, and now
don't take that shot.
My prayers are answered. I don't remember what happened in the hockey game, but
thank God.
Yeah, but we're Red Wings fans too. We did a lot of Red Wings games, and I did a YouTube video for Gift of Life in front of Joe Louis at the time to promote organ donation. So we got the call in, and she was supposed to drive because they said the patient is not supposed to drive to the hospital, but she was in such a ball of nerves, running around the house, grabbing this and grabbing it, just
calling people.
She was spastic. I was calm as a cucumber. I was at the back door just waiting. I was, Cherie, are we ready? And it's like, calling people. And we got in the truck, and I drove, and I was down in town in 15 minutes.
I had a bag packed for every season, every year.
Wow.
And I grabbed the wrong bag. I grabbed the summer bag, and here it is, December. I remember just, like he said, running room to room and making phone calls. And what did my brother say when I called him?
Oh, yeah, he says, so you're going to do it, right? I said, well, that's what I practice for. And he said, well, this is what you practice for, so you're going to do it, right? I said, absolutely, we're on our way.
Absolutely.
And then we called my brother, and him and his wife came to the hospital right away, and her father and his girlfriend came, and then they went in there, and
what was the prep? I mean, how was the prep of it all?
They cut my hair, because I had hair down to almost
I
my
cut
butt.
your hair.
She cut my hair, because I donated my hair to Locks of Love.
A few times, yeah.
A few times, because I grew it and cut it and donated it.
Oh, that's nice.
And we put a hair tie on it and cut it and then donate it. And the lady, the intake nurse was like, are you sure you want to do that? And I said, yeah, I want to do that. Just cut it off. Had a terrible haircut.
I would say that prep experience was probably one of the best hospital experiences I've ever had. They were so on key and so on point, and these nurses were spot on. They had all their machines, everything ready, getting you prepped, shaved, in your gown.
The PICC lines set up.
Everything ready to roll. And I remember telling him when they sent him down the hall, I said, there's no looking at the light when you get put under. I said, you're coming back to me and we have a life to live. So you do good. And he was in surgery for 8 hours from midnight until 8 the next morning. And my father and stepmom and his brother and his wife and we all sat all night in the waiting room, and I held his parents' rosaries and stayed awake the whole time. And the nurses were kind enough to text me every hour to keep me updated. I remember them saying, the lungs have arrived. We have made the cut. And I had the timeline in my book of that. And I just remember that whole night. And there was a couple hours that had passed where I hadn't heard from them. And the surgeon had told me that morning when he came to talk to me, he said that was when we were trying to get the old lungs out because he was so sick. His lungs had suction to his chest cavity and shifted. So they had to get those out, put him on a heart bypass machine and put the new lungs in. And then they said once they put the new lungs in, it was beautiful. He did so well.
I don't remember that night at all.
Like a rebirth. I'm sure it had to.
Incredible.
I can't even imagine what you must have felt like, or when like you said, you were out of it.
I was out of it.
You were out of it. But Cherie, when they came to tell you that things went perfectly,
it was just I just knew that he was going to do wonderful. I just had that feeling all night. And then when the sun came up and I looked out, I was just praying all night. I said, I know he's doing well. I just know it. And when the nurse called and said he was in recovery and he's doing well and the doctor will be out to speak with you. And then when we went to the room, I prepared myself because they said he's not going to look well because he's going to be pumped up on steroids. He's not going to. So I'm like, I have myself up. Okay, I got to psych myself up. It's not going to look like Robert. I go in, he looks fine.
They say you're supposed to look like the Michelin Man.
And you did fine.
I look just like me, I guess.
I mean, they had like probably 10 poles, 5 poles on each side of them, and all these IVs and 2 or 3 tubes in each side, and
strapped down to the bed.
It was, obviously difficult, but when he woke up, he was like...
Was he smiling?
I had a tube in my throat to help me breathe. And when I opened my eyes, there was an Asian nurse at the foot of my bed.
Uh-huh.
And when she seen me open my eyes, she goes, "You're not in China no more." and I'm like, and she said that, and I remember that. And then I looked over, and my friend that was from the rehab, the young man that was on the transplant list, he was standing on the left, and I'm looking at him, and I'm just going, trying to motion to him, like, get this thing out of my throat. I can't talk.
You can't talk, right?
So he understood what I was saying, and she says, you're not supposed to be awake yet either. It's a little early for you to be awake. And then they came in, I think, within an hour, and they pulled the tube out of my throat. I couldn't really talk without a sore throat. I was on like 1 liter of oxygen, and
they weaned it off within.
And then they had it off within a couple hours.
Yeah.
And I was breathing on my own. I was like, this is beautiful. And all I could say for the next 4 weeks was, wow. I mean, every time I took a breath or something, I just looked at her and I went, wow.
Immediately.
The next morning, I was up and walking. So I spent the night in my bed, all these tubes and that, and IVs and stuff. And the next day, they had me get out of bed, put all my stuff on a wheelchair, and I grabbed onto a wheelchair and we walked the halls.
Oh wow! Okay.
So it was like
immediately.
That's why you do pulmonary rehab, to keep yourself strong. So you can get out of bed that next day, right away.
The next day.
One thing about patients, though, with lung transplant is they have to kind of teach themselves to breathe normal again because they struggled for so long. So when they get new lungs, they have so much air, so they have to learn to use their diaphragm again to breathe normal. Like people that are healthy, we're just every day, but when they're on oxygen, it's a struggle for them, and they might have to turn it up for certain activities, or sleeping, they turn it down, but then they get these new set of lungs or heart, and they feel so much better. But so many patients have said it takes time to breathe normal. And you know what I'm saying? Like when they talk about that with the...
No, you learn how to breathe again. And you had to cough a lot because you had to cough stuff up.
Yeah.
And you always had to have a pillow against your chest because they cut me from right side to left side and opened me like a clamshell.
88 stitches.
88 stitches.
88 staples.
Staples, excuse me.
And so when you cough, it hurt. So you put this pillow there to keep the pressure.
Press, yeah.
So I did that. I had to use that for a couple of weeks. But
never complained.
I think it was on my 4th day, I had a setback. I had a hematoma in my hip.
Okay.
So my leg, I couldn't keep it straight. I had to bend it. So I was holding it up against my chest. It was just hurting so bad on my hip. So they took me down for an x-ray to find out what was wrong with me because my hip was killing me. And when they took me down for x-ray, the technician grabbed my leg. He goes, "Can you straighten your leg?" I said, "No." And he just grabbed it and straightened it. And I just cried. And the nurse said, "You can't do that. You don't know what's going on." And I wanted to hit him, but I couldn't. I'm like, oh. So they did an x-ray and they said, "You have a hematoma in your hip. We don't know where it's from. It's a big pool of blood."
Right.
And they said, "Well, we'll give you some pain medicine and that." And then a couple surgeons came into the room after we got back to my room, and they says, "Well, we want to take that hematoma out." And she says, "Well, why?" She goes, "Because it needs to be removed." She says, "Have you done this before?" He says, "Yeah, we've done it twice."
Oh, boy.
And how successful? He goes, "Well, neither one of them walked again." So she says, "Well, we're not getting it taken out." So then our doctors came in and we talked about it, and they said, "Well, hell no, don't take it out. Just let it Let it dissolve by itself. It'll go away. You know, you just keep up with the pain medicine, you know, to get through it, but it'll dissolve.
Did you kick that whoever that nurse, that doctor out of the room?
Those two doctors, I was like, man, what's going on?
And his team was like, he just had major surgery. We're not. This is foolish.
This is day 3, and they want to open me up down here now.
No way.
And it was lodged up like behind the kidney, and the nurse was or the doctor was explaining the location and everything, and she said, it'll dissolve.
Yeah. How long were you in the hospital for recovery?
For almost 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
We spent Christmas there, New Year's there.
We were known as the comedy couple on the floor.
Really, I can imagine that. I'm gonna be honest.
Red Wing hats and outfits in, and New Year's Eve.
Santa hats.
I can believe that. So December 8th, 2015, you went in for the transplant, and you came home.
Came home on January 6th, 2016.
Yeah, so you say New Year's, okay, 2016, okay. So what was life like? I mean, you had spent 8 years, you know, with oxygen tank.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, still living life, but what was life like?
Well, I think for a year, I always pulled at my cannula that wasn't there anymore.
Oh,
I always wondered, well, where's my cannula? But you know, it's in the back of your mind because 8 years I wore it, so I was constantly doing that. Life was so much better because when I was on oxygen, I couldn't snowball, and I love to snowball. I love the winter.
Do you? Okay.
So when we come home from the hospital on January 6th. I was in the truck and they backed up the driveway, and I had a plan on how to get in the house and all that because I was still a little bit wobbly on my legs because the hematoma kept me in the bed for I think 2 weeks, so my muscles deteriorated. But when we got to the house on January 6th, it was like 30 degrees out. I opened up that door and I just sat there and breathed that fresh, cold air. I couldn't do it previously when I was on oxygen. I sat there probably 20 minutes like that, just breathing this fresh air. You know, so I had a plan on going up the steps, getting in the house. But when I started going up the steps, my plan went away. I got 2 railings, and I got to the top of the steps, and this railing was out of the way because there was a door here. My plan was to take the glass out of the door so you could still reach the railing. Mm-hmm. But we didn't do that. And then I fell. I fell right inside the door. And they're all going, oh, no, oh, no, no. You know, so I started staples in here. But I was okay. They helped me get up and get in the house and get to my chair. And life was a little bit tough for a couple months. Yeah. I still had to go back down to the hospital once a week for x-rays and all that.
And INR check, blood checks.
And I had a nurse come into the house to do blood check and blood work. And
PT came to the house for a month. I was still off work. So that was good, you know, being able to assist with all the appointments and care, meals.
And I think I stayed in a bubble for 6 months. People came over, they had to wear masks. They couldn't really near me. You know, because a lung transplant, out of all the transplants, the lungs are the only one that is inside you, but the outside world affects it because you're breathing.
Unprotected.
You know, heart transplant is protected, liver's protected.
But the
lungs, you're breathing in the outside world. So any kind of, so many coughs, that goes in the air. If I breathe it, then I have an infection or I could get sick, very sick.
So everyone had to
his immune system's compromised the rest of his life. So he has to take anti-rejection drugs to make sure, you know, any type of cold or flu or infection can be harmful, obviously, to anyone, but to him or someone who's transplanted, it can be life-threatening.
Yeah. So it's been, 9 years?
8 years and...
because December, right?
9 years in
about
December.
6 months.
9 years in December. Before I even ask more about that, did you guys know the donor? Did you guys get to meet the donor family? Did you know who the donor was? I'm looking at that butt.
We didn't at the time. So
how did that come about?
So we knew about. See, my brother's father-in-law had a lung transplant previous to me being sick in that. Mm-hmm. So I seen him on oxygen struggle, get a transplant, do really well. And when I got listed, he introduced us to the lung transplant support group at Henry Ford. And he was like 15 years out at the time. But every month, wherever he was usually in Florida on vacation, he would fly in for that one day, for that 2-hour meeting, because he was giving back to the community.
Right.
So he shared his stories and that. So he got us to start going every month, once a month, to these meetings. And he'd come in just for the day, or he'd get his labs done and that, go to the meeting, and then he'd go back on vacation. We did the meetings every month for, well, until today. We're still doing them.
Yeah.
And I forget the question.
No, I was saying in terms of the organ donor.
Oh, okay,
yes.
that's right.
Did you get to find out who the organ donor was?
So I think it was a year and a half after the transplant. I got up one morning and I told her, I said, I wrote a letter to the donor family.
Oh, so they
So
let you know. So it's
that-
open for you to know who the donor family
That's
is.
where I was going with this. When my brother's father-in-law, he would go to they had what they call the transplant games, like the Olympics for the transplant people.
Uh-huh.
And they have them all over the United States, different areas. And he'd go,
Mm-hmm.
and he wrote his donor family over and over, and they never answered. So he was at the transplant games, and they were having lunch, and this other couple was having lunch, and they started talking, and they were a donor family.
Okay.
And my father-in-law was a donor recipient.
Okay.
And they'd never heard from their recipient, and he'd never heard from his donor. So they adopted each other. So he started writing them letters, thanking them, and talking to them and calling them, acting like their daughter was his donor, and they acted like this guy was the recipient.
But it wasn't.
No. But they just did it because
they
wanted a recipient family and a donor family. They connected that way.
Okay.
So he told me that he wrote letters and never got an answer. So I got up one day and I said, Cherie, I wrote a letter to the donor family. And it's got to go through Gift of Life. You send it to them, they read it, make sure there's no names or anything in it. Just your thankfulness. And then they'll send it to the donor family. And then, now they can choose to accept it and read it and write back, or they can just ignore it. So at the same time I told her I wrote a letter, she says, I wrote one too. So we exchanged letters and we read it and we just started crying because her words and what my words, it was just it had effects on us. So we sent a letter, and I think how many months later? It was 4 months.
Did that.
4 months later, we got a letter in the mail from Gift of Life, and it was a letter from the donor family. So we read that, and they wanted to meet us, and they told us that their son, did they say his name in the letter? No, they couldn't at the time.
No.
They just said that it was their son, and we'd like to meet you. We're close, or we're in the area. We didn't really know where they were. Mm-hmm. So we did this like 5 times, 5 letters. And finally, Gift of Life realized that, well, we want to meet them and they want to meet us.
Yeah.
So they sent us a release form where we sign our name and saying, yeah, we release our name and address and phone number to them. And they did the same to us. So now we know who they were. And I looked him up online, who he was.
Now, can you disclose who he was?
Yeah, his name was William Wayne McGee.
Mm-hmm.
He was 33 years old. And he had a fatal gunshot wound to the back of his head where he was brain dead. And he was on life support Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Mm-hmm. 5 days.
He was shot
and
killed.
They didn't know he was an organ donor.
Wow.
But Gift of Life showed up at the hospital because he was brain dead. And they kept talking to the uncle because his name was McGee also. Mm. And my donor's mother was going, why the hell do they keep talking to Odie and she ain't talking to me? I'm his damn mother. And then they realized, you're his mother. So they started talking to her. And she says, hell yeah, if he's a donor, we're going to donate his organs. I didn't know he was an organ donor, but that's all right with me. I want him to do that. That's what my son wants. That's what he gets. So we sitting there one Saturday morning having coffee and tea, and the phone rings, and she goes, it's the donor mother. I says, answer it.
So how did you guys know it was the donor mother?
Because we have caller ID.
But because you found out their names.
Because we exchanged names.
Right, so you knew the names at this point. Okay.
So she got our letter, our release form with our name and number, and she called right away.
She called. Morning.
She said, this is Angie, and she was with her sister Zizi, and this is Zizi, and we started talking. We talked for like 3 hours, like we knew them all our lives.
Oh my gosh!
It was just a crazy morning. We talked and talked and talked.
And then every week after that, we talked.
And every week after that, and then we decided that we're going to meet for a meal. Their family, my family, to get together for a meal and meet. So we made an arrangement to meet at this restaurant where some of my family came. A lot of her family came. There was like
some of mine.
17 of us. Some of Cherie's family. There was probably 17 of us, and we met. And we sat at this restaurant for another 4 hours, just talking and getting to know each other. And they brought me a plant, a peace lily, is that what it is?
Mm-hmm.
A peace lily plant, and a little rock that said breathe. And we took a stethoscope so they could all hear Williams. They call him Ugg, or two G's, God's gift, or so calm. He had a lot of nicknames. Everybody in the family has a nickname.
Yeah.
It's really crazy.
Oh, really?
Every one of them.
Everyone has a nickname.
So they could hear his lungs inside me, because I really want them to hear his lungs and know that he's still alive. He's living inside me.
He lives. Oh my God!
And he saved 5 lives, including Robert's.
He saved 5 lives, including yours.
4 other organs.
And another thing that we didn't cover was when the hospital called and said they had lungs. Those lungs were offered to 5 hospitals.
We were number 5.
We were number 5 on the list. So this wasn't a sure thing. This wasn't like, hey, we got lungs because there's a man on life support and you're going to get them. They offered them to 4 different hospitals, and they turned them down for certain reasons. Maybe the size of them, maybe the blood type, maybe the antibodies were wrong, but for some reason they all turned them down. And when it come to my surgeon, when he heard it, the lungs were short, a little bit shorter than what I needed. He says, Robert, he says, we're going to take a chance. We're going to put these lungs in you because they're perfect lungs. They're pretty and pink.
They're pretty.
And we're going to pray that if they fill up your chest cavity, they expand. So they took an x-ray of me like every hour for the first 2 days. And he says, they're expanding perfectly. They're working out. It's just like just what we
molding
want.
To your...
They molded right to my chest cavity.
To your chest cavity.
So it was like God's gift. 2 G's. It's
clearly God's gift.
And she said, his mother said, God makes no mistakes. She says, don't feel bad. She goes, when my son saved your life, he saved 5 lives that day, and you're the only one that reached out, so you're my new son. She said, you're my 2 sons in one. She texts me, she texts us every morning, good morning, sunshine. Good morning, spicy. Every morning.
It's a beautiful family. We're so blessed. We've lost our parents, and they're
You guys see them often.
A lot.
A lot.
It's your family.
Yeah, my new family. I see them more than I see them.
So you guys get invited to the cookouts.
Oh yeah, the cookouts, the grad parties. We've been to both his sons' graduations.
So he had kids.
He had 4
2
children.
boys and a girl.
Wow.
We've met 3 of them. One of them was down south. We haven't met.
Okay.
They were quite young.
He was her oldest son.
He was only 33.
33.
Was shot and killed.
And she has 2 other sons.
And the night that he was shot, I can remember that night clearly, the Friday before the call, watching the news and hearing about a shooting in Pontiac at a craps game in a basement. And I looked at her and I said, do they still play craps? I didn't know they did because the casinos are open.
Or something, dice or something.
They were playing dice in the basement. And somebody come in to rob it, and that's how it happened. The gun was accidentally discharged.
Okay.
But I remember hearing that story on the news.
He was being robbed. Okay.
And I think the second day after my transplant, me and my brother were talking at the same time of my transplant that coach of the Titans basketball in Wayne State, he had passed. And we were talking, well, maybe you got his lungs, because he was a big guy, real tall. I said, maybe he was an organ donor. Might have been him. But we didn't.
We never knew until we, sent our letter. And
Until I learned his name, and I looked him up, and then I read the story on how he died, and what happened and all that.
Many families don't reply to the letters. Everybody grieves differently, as you know, and some families never reply to the recipient. But we're grateful that
very fortunate.
We've met so many that haven't.
Why wouldn't you?
Heard back.
Why wouldn't a person want to know the family of, whose lungs were donated?
We don't take anything for granted. We're so grateful every day.
For that. Because I'm sure it's a blessing for them to be around you because you have their son's lungs. It makes it, I'm sure it feels a sense of closeness.
There's a bond.
It's a bond.
Definitely a bond.
And we're meeting new people constantly within the family and the friends and the community. And she'll say, he's got Ug's lungs.
Love it. Is that what she said?
Yeah.
I said, you know this guy? And I said, no. She goes, well, this is so-and-so, Ug's best friend. He's got his lungs.
He got his lungs. That's good. That's good. So she's proud of that.
And his brothers, he had a couple brothers, and they had a hard time accepting it at first, of course.
Of course.
But they've grown to understand that I'm really grateful for what their brother did, in saving my life.
Right,
I don't
right.
take it for granted.
No.
I thank them all the time. I call them my brothers. They're my brothers from another mother, but
Brother from
we're
another
brothers.
mother.
We are definitely brothers.
Absolutely. I love
And
it.
I had to ask her mother's name was Angie,
Mhm.
and I had to ask her. I said, everybody's got a name and everybody's got a nickname. I said, you need to send us a list of everybody's name and what their nicknames are, because I'm so confused.
Right.
There's like 30 of you,
Right.
and none of you use the right name.
Your
None
first,
does
your
is
real
you.
name.
Yeah.
That's good.
So
I'm spicy.
You're spicy.
They
Is
call
that
her-
what she calls
She
you?
calls me
Yeah.
spicy.
She calls you spicy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what she calls you when she see, hi, spicy.
Yeah. They all, pretty much everybody does. That's my bowling name and everything.
Spicy.
Anytime we went to an event and I've dressed up or something, she's like, "You're so spicy. You look so good."
Is that what she says?
Yeah.
Oh, but that is a beautiful blouse. I was going
Thank
to say
you.
that it is
She
spicy.
bought her a little cup, thermal cup, and it says a S on it. And I have one that has an R on it. But everybody goes, "What's the S for?" She goes, "Spicy." Because I know
Spicy.
it's Cherie ain't spelled with an S.
That's right. That's good. That's good. So it's going on 9 years. So what is life like in terms of treatment that you have to continue? Is there treatment you have to
I
continue?
do blood draws once a month.
Mhm.
They check all my levels. My kidneys are in kind of in first stage kidney failure
Mhm.
from all the medication that I take.
Okay.
Because I take medication at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. every day.
Mhm.
Anti-rejection medicine, vitamins, magnesium, just a bunch of different drugs to keep me alive, keep me from going into rejection,
Right.
keep my lungs from fighting with my body, because they might not get along if I didn't have anti-rejection. So I do labs once a month, check my levels. My levels are always perfect. Once in a while they're off, but they give it in a month and they come right back.
Okay.
And then I do clinic once every 6 months. That's where I go down and I get on a machine and I do blows so they can see my lung function. And then do a chest x-ray, sometimes a CT.
Mhm.
But I have to go see a heart doctor once a year, a skin doctor once a year, because now I'm very open to skin cancer because of some of the drugs. So there's a lot
Kidney doctor.
just doctors.
Yeah. So the lung transplant there's no expiration on that. It should live. It should be. It's sustainable.
The longer
as long as
time goes by, that, like he said, with medicine, the more they learn. Like years and years ago, there was a less percentage, like they would say maybe 5 to 8 years.
There was a
But
5-year
now,
survival rate.
we know people that have lived 25, 30 years. So I think it just depends on the patient. I think it's all about compliance, taking care of yourself,
That's
listening
right.
to the doctors, getting your labs, eating right.
That is
We mentor
true.
so many people that, we'll get on different sites and you'll see things that they're going through early in the process. And I'm like, hey, I remember this like it was yesterday. I suggest this.
Yeah.
Just, we've learned over the years just what works and hope
Compliance
that
with the restrictions.
it keeps
No,
him
like you said.
around for a very, very long time.
If you're compliant, like you said, no smoking, eating right, being around healthy
I
people.
I can't eat grapefruit. I'm not supposed to because it'll mess with my meds. I can't eat eggs with a soft yolk because there's a
Salmonella risk.
possible salmonella
Right.
poisoning.
Okay.
And
No lakes.
we shouldn't go on a cruise because of the people and
Too many.
too many reasons you get an infection.
Yeah.
A cold, catch a cold, or the flu or something. And most people, a lot of people that you hear and you talk to, they go into rejection at least once after a transplant, and they just treat that with medicine.
Okay.
But I've never had an infection or a rejection in me.
What does a rejection look like? What would that look like?
That'll make you short of breath.
Okay.
Maybe your lungs are starting to fight with your body, so your body's rejecting the lungs and the lungs are rejecting the body, so they have to up the dosage of your anti-rejection medicine and maybe give you a bigger steroid so to calm them down.
Okay.
Just to keep everybody on an even keel.
You would probably have symptoms of feeling sick, maybe a fever, but shortness of breath is the biggest indicator. And they can do their blows at home, which we always recommend to people after their transplant to continue to do that, because that's a huge first indicator If you're consistently having these great numbers and they're good,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden they're dwindling, then that lets them know, hey, this is a problem. I need to call my doctor and see what they recommend.
Okay.
But life's been great. Those first 2 years after transplant, we were unstoppable. We had our muscle cars out every day.
Did you really?
We were at all the car shows.
Resumed life.
We have a whole room
We would
of
go
trophies.
to a car show and a parking lot the size of yours. I'd put 10,000 steps on.
Yeah, we
in
just
in a couple
walk,
hours.
walk
around.
Yeah.
Before I really couldn't walk far.
And shifting his car was like, for
Oh,
me
yeah,
to see
I
him do that
remember
for the
that.
first time was
Because I used to get winded shifting my car, being on oxygen and that. But now it's like, I love it.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
And like he said, snowblowing. He loves snowblowing. So
you guys are very active.
Yes.
Which is nice. Which is
I love
very
it.
nice.
And we took a trip to Virginia to visit relatives, and we went to like 3 national parks, and we hiked up the hill, down the hill, around and around, had picnics. We went to a amusement park one day, and he went on like the scariest rides. I actually did a coaster with him, but he went on this one ride, and I was like, he's got to do it. He's got these new lungs. He's got to feel it. And he did the one that teeters like this.
The big swing.
Like the pirate.
Yeah, only this one went really high.
Oh.
You're like looking down at the ground. We like to have fun. We went to Virginia twice.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we were in there the first time we were in Virginia,
yeah, 2 days in.
We got there and her aunt or her cousin says, we got a big feast for you when you get here because she likes to cook. So we got there. She had this like 7-course meal there, all greasy and stuff.
Oh.
And I've already had a gallstones. So we get there and we eat this big feast, and that night go to bed. We were going to go to the coast, Nags Head or something.
The next day,
North Carolina, in the morning. I got up next day in the middle of the night. I got a pain in my side so bad I couldn't hardly sleep. And I'm doubled over, and I get up and I said, I don't think we can go. I said, I need to go to the hospital. So we just went to the nearest hospital, and I was having a gallbladder attack, and they sent me back to see the surgeon, and the surgeon said, "Oh, so you're a transplant patient?" And he says, "I haven't really done a lot of gallbladder surgeries." He said, "My suggestion is you should go home. This is our second day in Virginia. You should go home and get your gallbladder removed." He said, "I don't want to do it because you're a transplant patient." So we spent the day in that hospital. So then, we didn't go to the beach. And it turns out that while we were in the hospital, they had a torrential rainstorm at Nags Head, and cars were floating down the street.
Oh, no.
We would have been there. We would have been
Oh, you've been in trouble.
We would have been big trouble. So everything happens for a reason. God steps in again.
Glory to God. You're absolutely
So we
right.
cut our vacation short. We came home.
Mm-hmm.
I had my gallbladder surgery, and we went back because she had rented a cabin in West Virginia for the 4 of us to go and spend the weekend.
And we went through a lot of different towns, like where my grandparents were, and my grandmother's childhood home, and another place where my grandmother's brother had worked, the Greenbrier. I mean, it was a wonderful trip both times, even though we got cut short the first time. But this is close family, cousins on my mom's side.
Right.
Yeah, my grandma, my mom's nieces and nephews and cousins and that. So it was a beautiful trip to be able to take. They had been wanting us to come for a long time. What else did we do there? Oh, we went to Maine recently. His close friends that he grew up with. We went and stayed with them for a week. And we had done a few trips prior to you being on oxygen when you were working at Ford's.
Yeah, I went to
Wonderful.
Vegas.
I went to Vegas a couple of times. He proposed to me in Vegas.
Wow.
And his dad and my dad knew about it for 6 months.
Nobody else knew.
Nobody knew. Had I said no, he would have been in trouble because he had the family flown in, and for the ceremony, he said, "I'm going to have a Charles Bronson lookalike walk you down." And my dad came up behind me and tapped me on my shoulder, and he was able to give me away. So it was a beautiful, romantic
She had no idea
gesture.
anything was going to happen.
He had everything planned out. It was a beautiful. I always wanted an outside wedding. They had the falls and this area. It was perfect.
I said, "Will you marry me?" Really like that, and she said, "Yeah, when?" I says, "In 2 days."
In 2 days?
In 2 days, I said, "Yeah, tomorrow we'll go downtown, get the license, and the next day we'll get married." I said, "It's all set up.
Simple as that."
We got the honeymoon suite across the street at Tropicana. We're going to get married at the Tropicana. Everything's good.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I do want to ask you, when COVID hit, how did that impact you, Robert? Did that, because I know you had to, I'm sure, isolate, not be around people. Was there any concerns around?
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot of concern. I had to get the COVID vaccine, wear a mask constantly. I was so used to wearing a mask from my surgery. After my surgery, I wore a mask for 2 years everywhere I went. I didn't want nothing from nobody.
Absolutely, and I think everyone had to wear it around you too. I mean, because that's what you were accustomed to,
right?
Anyway.
But yeah, I caught COVID, I think 2 years ago.
You did.
He's had it a couple
times.
It was
a very, very, very slight.
Okay.
Nothing major. I had like a cough and a sore throat and a runny nose, and that was it. Then I went down to the hospital for my labs, and they said, "Well, they're going to check you," and they said, "Oh, yeah, you had COVID."
Wow. See, like you said, you're a healthy person. Like you said, it was just your lungs, so that probably definitely is in your favor that you're a healthy person and you have good people around you. People don't realize how important it is to have good people around you, because so you're not stressed all the time.
Yeah, they can take some of that stress off.
It's great to have a good caregiver.
Yes.
To have someone in your corner that that does everything that needs to be done. Yeah. She was always filling my medicine things for the week and ordering my meds and setting up my appointments. She still does set up my appointments and that. We set them up according to her schedule, not mine, because mine's open. I'm retired now, so
I attend the appointments with them. I always have.
She goes to all my
important too for a caregiver, because as a patient with anyone, even when you're healthy, I think you forget when you go into the doctor's office what you want to ask.
Right.
So I just like to always be prepared and on guard. Even like at the hospital, when they were giving you insulin, 2-3 days, I'm like, why don't you ask them, let's find out why. And you're not diabetic. And I guess many patients, their levels are all off right after the surgery. And they were like, it's protocol. And I said, but his numbers all look good. Tell them you don't want it.
I'm in there eating candy, and they're checking my sugar. Well, no wonder my sugar is up. I'm eating candy.
You're eating candy, right?
Chocolate.
So did you stop? So have you stopped working?
No, I've always worked. The only time I took off was
6 weeks.
The 6 weeks, and then I stayed home after as well.
A month, I think.
Yeah, so I was off during that time, FMLA.
Right.
I've been very fortunate. I've been with the same company 30 years. I work for doctors, and they've been amazing. They sent us this huge gift card when we came home after the surgery, and it was for meals. And I just thought that was the best gift, because who feels like cooking? I have enough to do.
Absolutely.
Even though I love to cook and bake, but I mean, and it was right after the New Year. So I'm like, we ordered a steak meal one night.
From a real fancy restaurant.
Yeah. And then just having that, those meals, so nice. But I worked at the office, for many years, and I did billing and worked up patients, and, we see a range of patients from diabetics to premature babies. We treat diseases of the retina, the back of the eye.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, as I said, I worked in the office. I worked up patients. I did billing. I was an admin for 10 years. And then I was lucky enough, and the opening became about in our control center, and another group had bought our group. So our group is worldwide, but with this other group on board too, it made us even larger. And I was able to work from home, which I still do. Oh, wow. So I just triage, patient phone calls come in. I fill their prescriptions, answer their questions, schedule their appointments, check their insurances. And we just have a great team. And it worked out perfectly, because obviously with Robert, I did not want to be in an atmosphere where there's a potential of me bringing home something for him to get. So, during COVID, I was off immediattive. His doctors were like, you can't be at the office.
Right.
And even after that, going back, I was fearful, like, my God, what if I bring something home? But I've had more colds and bugs than him since COVID. I never got sick.
Immune system.
I have headaches. That's it. But
yeah, that's great.
He's like Superman. My family calls him Superman.
Superman. Awesome. So before there's a few more questions I want to ask, because I know our listeners will want to know. So this amazing book, and like I said, I got to be honest, I haven't finished reading it, but I have been reading it. It's a very good book. An Unknown Angel's Gift, a couple's long transplant journey. What inspired you to write this book, and when did you start?
I started writing it. Well, I should say, when this process started with him and I mean, I've always journaled my whole life or wrote poetry or read biographies. I've always liked writing as a way of putting my feelings on paper. So I journaled everything throughout the process, different appointments, different things I learned. There wasn't a lot of resources out there for transplant patients. When I would look things up, it was all about, okay, this patient's had diabetes or they've had cancer, or not a lot of things told from a caregiver's perspective. So I'm like, I need to journal this and I'm going to write a book to help people one day.
Wow.
If it inspires and offers hope and helps somebody, not only in transplant, but in any medical situation where they're caregiving for someone, give tips and ideas and suggestions. That's what I'm going to do. So I journaled for years. And then I always knew I was going to have a couple's lung transplant journey. And I knew I wanted Angel in the title because this person that was going to save his life was like a gift from God, an angel. And it was like, this person's unknown and it's a gift. So that's what I came up with. And as you said earlier, it has been all about him and I. And our whole marriage has always been
a beautiful story.
The ups and downs like any marriage, and
Absolutely.
Communication is huge, and just inspiring and leaning on each other.
Yeah.
For hope.
And you guys have a lot of support groups too. I think not a lot of support groups, but you attended support groups.
Yes,
you're very involved in the community.
That's helpful.
We're both Gift of Life volunteers also. So
okay.
We do tables, and I've done speeches and seminars. I've talked to doctors and nurses, students. Whenever they ask, I'm ready. I'll volunteer. I'll do this. I'll do that. Yeah. We have one at all our book signings, our book tour. We have a Gift of Life table, and they usually send a volunteer out. But if the volunteers show up, then I'm the volunteer. I don't have a problem. You go push your story in your book, and I'll sit here and push Gift of Life.
I know.
Because the more donors we get, the better we are.
The purpose. I'm going to tell you, it's so nice to know what your purpose is, and it's like you guys have definitely took it and ran with it. God's purpose for your life, and it's like a lot of times these things can happen, and you just kind of keep it all to yourself. And you don't necessarily share, and you just kind of go into a shell. But you guys decided, you know what? I'm going to make this is a learning opportunity. This is a gift in some way, so that you can, actually support and help other people and encourage, organ. Am I saying that right? Organ donation.
Yes.
Am I saying that right?
Yes.
I'm going to be honest. I didn't know much about organ donation, and it really makes you think about being a donor, or just being a donor. Period. I think it's the unknown why some people don't become a donor. Were you guys donors before this?
Yes.
Oh, you were? Okay, yes. Good.
There's a lot of
that's really
myths out there about being a donor. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't want to be a donor because if I get in an accident and I get to the hospital, they're going to want to take my heart and donate to somebody. Mm-hmm. They're not going to save my life, which is totally false.
Right.
Doctors do not know you're a donor, and they don't care. First thing the doctor does is to save your life, no matter what. That's their job. That's their oath. Mm-hmm. And people they just think that if they see that heart on my license, then they're going to make me a donor and not save my life.
They're not going to save my life. Right. Oh, wow. I never thought
I had to do like I said, I did that YouTube video for Gift of Life, and it was Waiting to Live. It's on YouTube. It's pretty old.
Waiting
I can't
to
remember
Live, Wayne County. I think it was like around 2010.
2010.
Somewhere around there.
And it was for the black community downtown. It was the whole push was for the black community, because most of the black community does not believe that the doctors will save your life before they'll donate your organs. And so there was a big push.
Wayne County in Michigan was the lowest county for organ donors on their license.
So it was like me and 4 other people that did this little video. Mm-hmm. One was a heart patient.
Young girl.
I was a lungs, a kidney, and a liver. And the young girl, she's passed, didn't she?
Yeah.
I
think she got the heart, and then, but the kidney recipient, she is still, I'm friends with her on Facebook, and she's still very well involved with Gift of Life, and she's doing fantastic. She went on to graduate high school, graduate college. She's pursuing her career. She's done really well. Awesome. And the liver recipient, he's doing really well. He was a Spanish gentleman.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there were 5 people, like you said, that day that it was at a different venue, downtown
whatever their
Detroit.
venue they picked, that's where they shot.
Yeah.
You and as you talk.
Yeah, and like you said, in the African American community, like you said, is it's not someone we're not aware, so therefore, and then there's some concerns and
Right.
fears
If you're
around.
not aware or don't know, then
Yeah, but like with your young man who's an African, your donor, right? Am I saying? I always want to make sure I'm
He's
saying
my donor.
your donor. He was an African American male,
Yes.
so. And I'm sure, like you said, his family was somewhat surprised, right? Because he didn't necessarily share that. And to be honest with you, I was a little surprised too, because it is a fear there. So it's nice to know that he pushed past that fear.
All of our organs are pink. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
care what color a person is or what their nationality is. All our organs
Yeah.
are interchangeable and they're pink.
There you go.
We're all the same people.
We are so more alike than different.
My donor family, she told us right away, she goes, I don't recognize color.
Right.
I said, I don't either. I says, we were just beautiful people.
Yes. I wish we all could just be that way.
If the world could only be that way.
If the world could only be that way. Yeah.
We do an event every year for Gift of Life to honor the donor families. And it's incredible. And we sit at the table and watch every family come in and talk to them. And it's very difficult because they've lost a loved one. And that's a big part. It's hard for the person waiting and for the caregiver when you think about, they lost someone so dear to them.
And saved your life.
But they saved so many lives and they're able to live on. And for us to be able to live our life, like I said, we do not take it for granted. And every day is a gift.
Yeah.
This William, saved 5 lives. He was an incredible part of their family. And we're just so grateful.
Yeah, you can tell they loved him dearly just based on.
Oh, yeah. He was very special to the community. She said the funeral, they couldn't even get everybody in there.
I think we were 5 years after the transplant. We met him. We were hanging out with him, bowling with him. And it was like November of 5 years, or November of whatever. She says, I haven't had Christmas since William died. She goes, I want to put up a Christmas tree this year. Would you two like to come to my house for Christmas?
Oh, boy. Wow.
And I was like, that was a big thing to them. And I said, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So ever since, she has us over for Christmas, like Christmas Eve, puts up a tree, and we all exchange gifts. And, some of the family stops by. And I think recently, the last 1 year or 2 years, Kelsey and Elmer have been coming now because they bowl with us.
Nice.
It's just so great.
That's beautiful. So we have about a couple more minutes. And I would like for you guys, to speak to our listeners about organ donation. If you had to speak to that person that's on the fence about organ donation, Robert, you've kind of spoken to it already, but I really want a more intentional conversation with our listeners about organ donation, how important it is. Can you speak to that? And Cherie, I would like for you to do it as well.
There are so many people on the waiting list for different organs, mostly kidneys. That's the hardest one because they're going through dialysis once, twice a week, 3 times a week. And when you die, there's no sense in taking your organs with you. You're going to be, all you're going to do is either you're going to be cremated or put in the ground. Those organs aren't going to do you no good no matter what. Mm-hmm. So if you sign up to be an organ donor, and you can save up to 8 lives, or you can enhance up to 100 people's lives with your organs, with your cornea, with your tissue. There's so many things that you can donate that you don't need after you've passed.
Yeah.
And I would say it's selfish to not be an organ donor.
I would agree.
Because you can actually save many lives and you could be remembered by not just by your family, but by another family. Your family can grow further.
Yeah.
You can if you make that sacrifice.
Make that connection.
And it's not really a sacrifice because
you're
on
on earth anymore.
Right.
And I think it's just ignorance. I just think it's it's just fear. I think people are just very fearful of the unknown. And like you said, will my life be saved?
Or what will I look like when they cut me open and take my organs? What will I look like in my casket?
Yeah.
Well, you're going to look the same.
Yeah.
They take care of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Knowledge is key. The knowledge is key. So Cherie, if you can, the last few minutes.
When you we're all put on this earth for a reason, and God has a plan. You know, I think to these gift of life events and meeting these families that have lost someone, and that person was an organ donor, and you meet the recipients as well. It's so important. Losing someone is hard, but knowing that your loved one saved someone that was waiting for a life-saving gift, and they don't take it for granted. They live their life, and if they're blessed enough to meet the donor family and just not take it for granted. But it's hard to put into words.
You're doing a good job.
Because I'm telling it from a caregiver perspective and not a patient, but anyone that if you're on the fence about it, just think about what you can do to help others. There are babies waiting for hearts and children and people of all ages and ethnicities that are on dialysis and struggling and scared and waiting for a chance to feel better. As hard as it is to make that decision, or if you're scared about them cutting you or what they're going to do, it's a good cause to be an organ donor. I wouldn't have the life and my marriage that I have today if William wasn't an organ donor. Wow. And he helped so many people, and he gave us our life back.
Yeah. And as you are doing the same thing, you're helping so many people. It just didn't stop once you got your transplant, you got your organ donation. You continue to bless others by spreading, building community around the importance of it, and just supporting others.
Paying it forward.
Paying it forward. That's the right word right there, Robert. Paying it forward. And I know you have some book signings coming up.
Yes.
Here. So what we'll do is we'll put the dates on our page so that people can, I would love to come to some of them. Are they this summer or when are they?
There is, well, next month in June is in Pontiac in the donor's hometown. So we're very excited about that one.
What date is that?
That's June 22nd. There will be 6 authors there that day, and I'll be speaking at 2:30.
Okay, that's nice.
And there's be question and answers and
we'll
signings.
We'll have Gift of Life there.
Okay.
We have a representative from UNO's coming in from Florida.
Okay.
To be there for that. The donor family will be there.
On June 22nd?
The donor or the surgeon, we're thinking the transplant team's going to show up from the hospital, maybe the surgeon, and the donor, my donor William's friends are going to show up. So it's going to be a big event.
It's a big event. So where is it located?
In Pontiac Library.
Pontiac Library, okay.
It's 60 East Pike Street, and it's from 12 to 4 on Saturday the 22nd.
Thanks for joining today's episode. If you enjoyed Storytime, don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Leave us a review and share with your friends to help us reach more listeners. Stay tuned for more insightful stories. Until next time, take care and keep exploring new connections with us. Thanks so much, Cherie and Robert.
Thank you. That was great.